Hey everyone, Jim here with something very cool to share with you. February 11th does mark the anniversary of Patrick Whelan's hanging at the old Ottawa Jail. And every year on February 11th, we hold special tours to commemorate the evening and of course to see if any paranormal activity might occur on such an important date. And we call these tours Whelan's Night. Now this year on February 11th, we decided to do something a little bit different. Invited our good friends from Phantoms of Yore, a local paranormal investigation group, to join us, and with our customers, perform a series of experiments. Now, most notable of these was the use of a spirit box inside of the cell where the condemned would wait right before their execution. The idea being, could we communicate with the dead? Could we get a response to a series of questions? And, well, the results are quite intriguing. Before we get to that, an obvious question might be, what is a spirit box? And Eric from Phantoms of Yore is going to break it down for us.
What is the spirit box? The spirit box sweeps through radio stations, AM or FM, and it goes so quickly that you wouldn't be able to hear somebody saying a sentence or even a two-syllable word most of the time. So if you're asking questions, and for example, you get Patrick Whelan that comes on the radio back to you, you would never expect to actually get that as it's going so fast. So that would be a direct response from the spirit box to your question. Now, does this prove that there was a ghost talking back to you? Not necessarily, because until we get a direct response every time we say something to it, it really wouldn't be proven as scientific. And even at that time, somebody would say it's not real. Bottom line is, we are testing out the hypothesis of the spirit box. Can it really communicate with the dead? We can't say for sure, but on Whelan Night, the guests got the opportunity to test it out themselves. We got some pretty crazy responses with multiple guests. Here's what we found. You be the judge, but remember, we are implanting the idea of what we heard.
Now, these first few clips are very eerie. And that's because the voice that seems to respond sounds a lot like a child's voice, two child's voices, in fact. And we do know that children were inmates at the old jail, some as young as 10 or 12. And in these responses, you'll hear two names mentioned, Ian and Will. Could it possibly be that these two children, their spirit, is somehow trapped in the old jail?
Are any of the spirits here with us children?
It seems like a hard no.
Who's in here?
In the next clips, JL from Phantoms of Yore and I start asking the questions if there are any male spirits present. Now, what's interesting about the responses is there are several that sound to be the same voice, and it doesn't sound like they want our help.
Are any of the spirits who are here with us men? If you are here with us, if you are here with us, is there anything that you need from us? It's that same voice.
It's very similar.
Another guest pulled on this thread as well, asking if the spirits, if present, needed any help or assistance. And she seems to get two strong and very different answers. The first saying very firmly, no. The second, though, seems to be asking for help.
Am I alone right now? Am I just talking to myself? Like I said, my name's Tyler. What's your name?
A question I had before we began the experiment was, would we get any responses in French? Ottawa is a very bilingual city now, as it was when the jail was in use, and I was curious to see if we would get responses in both language. And it appears like we did.
So if there are two people, do we have names? One name? I heard bonjour. Do you have a name? Can you say your name if you're in here with me?
I've saved perhaps the most surprising clips until the end. And as you'll recall, the whole reason we were conducting these experiments on this night is it was the anniversary of Patrick Whelan's execution, his hanging, at the old Ottawa Jail. And if there was a night we would expect to make contact with this figure, this would seem to be the night. However, Whelan was not the only person executed in the building. In fact, there were 3. And in just a moment, you'll hear one of our tour guides go through them slowly, name by name by name. Now, the final one she'll mention was the final person executed at the jail. Now, his name is Eugene Larmont, and he was executed in 1946 for the killing of a police detective. Could Eugene Larmont's presence be the strongest spirit we encountered this night?
Patrick James Whelan. William George Seabrook. Eugene Larmont.
If there's someone in here, do you have a name?
We got 2 fairly strong responses there to the name Eugene Larmont. But what comes next really blew my mind, as a very skeptical customer started asking questions and seemed to get responses that absolutely match up to Larmont's story.
What crime did you commit to end up here in the prison? Explain in detail the crime that you committed to end up in the prison.
I have to admit, when we first started planning these experiments, I could have never guessed at the quantity or the quality of the responses we were going to receive. Now, as Eric mentioned earlier in the video, these aren't necessarily proof of paranormal activity or that we were in fact speaking to the dead, but they are really interesting. Certainly make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up and add to the lore of the old Ottawa Jail. Now, if you're interested in visiting the jail yourself, we do have tours every night during March break, as well as tours in Kingston and Toronto as well, and we'd love to see you out. So, until we meet again, sweet dreams.